Hi, welcome to Community Homework's virtual class this evening. We're going to get you ready for spring. I see a kitty cat. Tonight, our presenter will be Mandy Dixon, who is a master gardener and has taught some gardening classes for us in the past. Tonight, she will be here to answer your questions, so please watch the first video carefully. They are from the Portage Public Library. Mandy had produced them for them, and they were willing to share with us. We're glad you can join us, and please remember that we try to have a class every Tuesday evening. Hope you can always join us, or if not, you can go back on either our Facebook page or on YouTube to watch the replay of tonight's class or any of the other classes we have done so far. Mandy, we're so glad you could join us tonight. Is there anything you'd like to say before we start your video?
Well, I hope everyone enjoys, and if you have any questions, make sure you save them and we will go through those.
Great. Mandy and I will be joining you after the first video to answer your questions, and then there will be another short video. So please stick with us. You'll probably get to see our kitty cats who have no manners whatsoever and will probably be joining us, invited or uninvited. So please sit back, get ready to get your garden ready. You're going to have a great time with some good vegetables and flowers this spring and summer.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mandy Dixon. I'm an MSU Extension Master Gardener, and this is Gardening 101 webinar series. This is the Seed Starting Guide by Portage Library. Let's get started. So why do you start from seed? Well, starting from seed gives you a much better selection of plants. You can pick anything from your grandmother's heirloom tomato to a melon that you've just seen come out, to striped squashes that you've never seen in a greenhouse before. It also gives you a chance to do something when it's snowing out and you can't do anything else garden related in the actual garden. It may be cheaper. It may not be, but it may be depending on what you put into it. And it is fun, but it's not for everyone. And it does require specific setup and care. And there could be extra costs involved that may make it more expensive. It just depends on how you are approaching this. We're going to talk today about how to make it as little expense for you as possible. So what do you want to grow? Grow what your family enjoys. Grow what you're passionate about. I grow about 20 different varieties of tomatoes because that's what I love to grow, and that's what I love to taste, and that's what I love to put in sauce. And that is what I am passionate about. So if you're passionate about a certain flower, grow that. If you love heirloom tomatoes, grow those. If you want to make your own pickles, grow cucumbers. Grow what your family enjoys. Or not. Don't grow cats. That's a much advanced class for gardening than this one. So keep that to the professionals. When do you start your seeds? Now we're going to calculate this out for you so you have a better idea of how you can determine when to start your seeds. If you start your seeds too early, you're going to have to keep them indoors for a lot longer than you really want to. They could get root bound. The goal is to get them outside at the right time. So we're going to read the seed packet and we're going to know the growing zone and the frost-free dates for this area. Now in the Kalamazoo and Portage area, the growing zone is 6A. So if you look at the little maps that are sometimes on those seed packets, it'll tell you start from May to June in this area. And that'll give you an idea of when you can start your plants. But it helps to know the estimated last frost date, which is May 15th. So that's the time when you have less than a 50% chance of having frost. Now, the last frost-free date, which is when you have less than a 10% chance of having frost, is May 27th. So I typically wait for my peppers and tomatoes to get them out closer to the end of May. Now, to calculate when you should start those seeds, you're going to base it on that frost-free date of May 15th. And if you're running late on these seeds that we talk about, don't worry about it. There are plenty of things you can put directly in the garden that'll get you started, like your squashes, your lettuce, your peas, your radishes, your carrots have to go directly in the garden. You can start spinaches right now. So this stuff will start right in the garden without you starting any indoor time at all. Now, why do you grow flowers? Flowers brighten up your mood. You can have beauty outdoors and you can bring it indoors in a vase. Or you can just make your own patio containers of the flowers you love the most. Save money by making your own arrangements. But why grow vegetables? Well, you can save money. You save that trip to the grocery store for those green beans or lettuce that you want for dinner. You know where your food is grown. You know you didn't put any pesticides or chemicals in your food to grow them. And you can reduce your carbon footprint. Your food to table is only steps away. Your garden is outside your back door, your front door. And you don't have to have that trip in a truck for your vegetables to get to your table. So the seed packets are where we're going to start. If you don't have a seed packet for some reason, do an internet search and you can find the information right on the internet for the varieties of seed you're trying to grow. So looking at these seed packets, this is a peppers, a mini bell pepper mix. And you can see there's a lot of information on the seed packet. But on the back, we're going to focus on the little information that tells you how to plant these peppers. So you're going to plant them an eighth of an inch deep. When you thin them, which is when you plant them out, you're going to plant them 18 to 24 inches apart. They have to go in full sun. They only grow up to 24 inches tall. And they mature 60 days from the transplant time. So from the time you actually can get them in the garden. But you can't get them in the garden until after the last danger of frost. And you're going to want to start them indoors 6 to 8 weeks before that last frost date. So if we say that last frost date was May 15th, and if you backtrack, you should have had those in your seed starting trays by the middle of March or the very beginning of April at the latest. But here's your radishes. Now radishes are a quick growing vegetable. Radishes you directly sow into the garden when the soil warms in the spring or the late summer for fall picking. You plant them a quarter inch deep, 1 to 2 inches apart, and they will mature in 22 days. So from the time you put them in the ground as a little teeny seed, you'll have a full-size radish in 22 days. That's definitely farm to table and perfect for your salad. Now, if you've got some seed packets laying around and before you go and throw them out, those seeds might still be viable. You can test them by doing germination tests. To do a germination test, you're going to place those seeds in a moist paper towel in a covered container like a Ziploc bag or a Tupperware, something that's covered and sealed, and then put it in a warm environment on the top of your refrigerator, on the top of your cable box, on the top of your aquarium if you have one, whatever you have that's a very warm area. And then you check every couple of days. So these are some seeds that I germinate tested. I put them in there about 5 days ago. And as you can see, these are green bean seeds, and every single one of them have germinated, and they have a little root system coming on them. Now, these seeds are my green beans, and they're from 2012. That means when I go and plant them in the garden this summer, that I should have a very good germination rate because I have 100% that came on this test. And they're from 2012, so that means I can use some of my older seeds up without worrying about not having any plants grow. Now, if you do your germination test and let's say only 50% of those seeds come up, you can still use them, just plant them heavily. So if you want 10 plants, you want to plant about 20 seeds because you expect to get about 50% germination. Now, to start seeds, there's some basic equipment that you're going to need. You're going to need some form of container. Now, if you have those seed starting trays with the lids and the base for water, use those. Those are great. Otherwise, you can use alternative containers. So if you see, we have just a margarine container. You can use that. Just make sure you put drainage holes on the bottom because you don't want to make your seedlings soggy, and it's better to water from the bottom. Or you can use toilet paper tubes. If you look, they take those toilet paper tubes and they cut them in half, and then they make 2 shorter tubes. And once you've got your shorter tubes, you can just cut the little ends to make little tabs. And when you fold in your tabs, like it's a cardboard box, now you've got a perfect little container to fill with soil and put your squash seeds, your tomato seeds, your pepper seeds right in the container. And you'll water from the bottom because you're going to stick this whole thing in a plastic tray of some sort. Now you're going to fill all of these containers, whatever ones you're using, with soil. Make sure that soil is moist completely. You'll have to make sure that it's completely moistened from the top to the bottom and not just on the top, because that's the way your plants have a place to go for their root systems. You can either do that before or after you put it in the pots, whatever's easier for you. Sometimes I find it easier to moisten the soil before I put it in those containers, but other times it's easier to do it when it's in, depending on the type of container. After you've got your container filled with soil, you'll want to add your seeds. Space them out as your package states. Add a small amount of soil on top of those seeds and pressing them in lightly, unless the seed package says otherwise. There are some seeds that require light to germinate, so those you won't cover with any type of soil. To give them a little bit of moisture on top and get them starting quicker, you'll want to lightly mist with water. I find a spray bottle works really well for that process. Now make sure you label everything. Labeling will give you a reminder of what you put in those containers. When you go to plant things out, you'll want to know what they were so you know how far to space them apart. Like your peppers we talked about, you'll want to space those 18 to 24 inches apart. So you're going to find a warm place to put your seeds. Keep them covered with plastic until they germinate. If you have those lids for those seed starting trays, use those. If not, you can certainly use plastic wrap, and you'll want to uncover them as soon as you start seeing those seeds poking out from the soil. Seeds require a constantly moist environment, but they don't want to be soaking wet. You'll want to use a potting soil and not dirt from your garden, because dirt from your garden may have pathogens that could kill those seeds. So after the seeds have started germinating, though, remove the plastic like we talked about. You're going to bottom water for the best results. So take that tray, pour the water in the bottom, and let it soak up from the bottom into your seed pots. Warmth will speed up your germination, and after they sprout, light is the most important. So if you have your fluorescent shop lights, you can use those. Those just need to be a few inches above your plants, and you'll want to raise them as the plants get taller. But if you don't have that, you can use a sunny windowsill. Just make sure you turn the containers every day and keep an eye to make sure they've got enough light. If you don't have enough light, your plants will start getting tall, and they'll be what we call leggy, which means the stems are very skinny. And those plants can fall over, and they're going to be very difficult to transition to the outdoors. In about 3 weeks, you can use a water-soluble fertilizer and very dilute, put in a little bit of fertilizer to help them grow. Now, if you want to get started, let's use some science-based resources to give you additional information. As we all know, if it's on the internet, it must be true. Well, there's a lot of old wives' tales out there. There's a lot of false information, and we hear the words fake news all the time. It comes true with gardening resources as well. So make sure you're using science-based resources. Here's a few to get you started. We've got a Gardening in Michigan site that's hosted by the MSU Extension. They also have a smart gardening site, which talks about being water conscious and low pesticides and using much more environmentally friendly methods of growing. The MSU has a selecting and starting seeds indoors, which will help you get these seeds started. And there's also a great program called Ask an Expert. Now, this Ask an Expert website allows you to go on there anytime of the day, 24/7, and type in what your question is. So if you want to know what's happening to your seedlings, you're having an issue with them, just type in your question, and one of the expert master gardeners will get back with you within just a day or two and give you an answer to your question and help you along with improving your growing experience. Now, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of those or to us, and we will get you started. I hope everyone enjoyed this and go out and get growing. Thank you for your time. Hello and welcome. My name is Mandy Dixon. I'm an MSU Extension Master Gardener.
And we're going to pause that second video for just a second. Does anyone have questions on Mandy's first presentation? I know I learn something new every time, and I've watched it several times this week to get ready for tonight. And I've attended the class when she's been in person with us. I love cutting the toilet paper tubes up. I mean, what a great way to save some money. Do you like to do flowers or vegetables better, Mandy?
I'm a big vegetable person, but I love flowers too. So I have a decent amount of both in my gardens. But really, vegetables are what got me going. Um, I love just starting from these teeny tiny little seeds, putting them out in the garden, and suddenly the plants are like 10 feet tall. At least some of those tomato plants get pretty tall. I did want to make sure I mentioned, though, the videos are from last year, and we did them in about April, May, late April, early May. So if you heard any comments about it's a little late to start peppers, that's not right now. That was back at the end of April, early May. You were running a little late.
Not too late to start now, but that's why we wanted to do this tonight so that people can start to think about what they might like to plant, where they might like to plant, which will be covered in the next video. I know at my house, I have pretty much nowhere to put a garden. So I have cat litter buckets in my driveway that I put the soil in. I'm not supposed to call it dirt, soil in. And I plant tomatoes out there and usually put some zinnias or marigolds or something around them so that it's pretty and yummy at the end of the summer.
Yes, I have some of those 5-gallon buckets myself. I have a big garden, but I like the ability to move them around, and I can even put them in the garage when there's going to be an early frost.
And that would be a great idea too, that you could plant in something like that. It doesn't have to be a cat litter bucket. It could be your soap bucket, that you could start things in so that you can put them out and then bring them back in.
Right.
If you started a little too early or we have a strange spring and summer, like we've had a strange winter. You
Right.
kind of never do know because those dates are predictions. They are not guarantees. It's Mother Nature. And there again, if you don't have to go out and cover everything up and you can just grab it and set it inside for a couple of days, until we really know that frost is gone, and then you can plant. So
I tend to hold the tomatoes and peppers, the stuff that really likes heat. I tend to hold those at least a week or two after the last frost date. It's safer that way, and they prefer heat, so putting them out too early is going to slow them down quite a bit.
right. How long, once you have a tomato plant, and I know there are special ways that you should plant those tomatoes. I learned that from you. How long before you actually see, let's say you're putting it in your garden on June 5th. I'm randomly picking a date. When can I have a tomato?
I usually plant like the last couple days of May, or the first couple days of June, so about the same time you're talking. And I have my first tomatoes usually by the mid to end of July.
Mine seem to take forever, and they probably don't really, but they're in my driveway, so I see them all the time. And
Right.
I go and look every day and go, oh, one cherry tomato. And they never make it in the house because they're so good right off the plant.
Right.
But
yeah, sometime mid-July, end of July is usually when I get my first couple, and then they start coming in full in August.
And so I know you can plant tomatoes in a bucket. What else could I plant in a bucket if I don't have a yard area that I could grow, dig up? What if I live in an apartment?
Almost anything can go in a container. I've done peppers and flowers, obviously go in containers. I've done a zucchini. I picked a smaller bush variety, but I've done a zucchini in a container. Sometimes you can do cucumbers in a bucket and put them on a trellis so they can climb your trellis, and you've got this decorative fixture in wherever you put it in the bucket. You can put the toilet paper rolls right into the soil. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. Dorothy is a very avid gardener. I've seen her backyard. She also loves to weed. So, if anybody needs weeding done, let me know, and I'll get you in touch with Dorothy.
So yes, you can put toilet paper rolls that you use for seed starting right in the garden. They're probably going to be a little bit broken apart by the time you get there, because you are watering from the bottom, so you're soaking that paper. Um, I wouldn't use any of the kind that are kind of waxy, because I know sometimes you get those roll towel ones that are a little waxy. I wouldn't use those, but your normal toilet paper rolls work great.
I think that's a great tip for, to help save some money, if nothing else. And obviously, if you buy a packet of green peppers or whatever, you don't even need to use all those seeds the first year because they might be fine the next year. I've always wondered why I wanted to buy a package of seeds that had, 30 or 40 seeds in it when I wanted one or two plants, when I could go to the greenhouse and buy one or two plants. But
Well, tomato seeds are viable. I've started them as old as 12 years old. So tomato plants and pepper plants are pretty well. Your onions and chives, those really don't last more than a year, typically. You do a germination test just to make sure, but so some of the seeds are really short-lived, but tomatoes and peppers and beans, they last a good 10 years. So you can easily use that many seeds in 10 years if you are growing more than one time.
okay, I am not a vegetable gardener. I'm a flower person, other than my tomatoes and my cat litter buckets. Can you save the seeds from your tomatoes and dry them somehow to use as seeds for the next year, or from any other type of plant? Can you save the seeds from the green peppers?
You can save seeds if you do them correctly. There's certain kinds of plants that you can't save seeds and have the same tomato come out. So let's say you go and buy a tomato from the store and it happens to be a variety that's considered a hybrid. And you're not really going to know that just based on the store because they don't tell you what variety it is. But if it's a hybrid and you save that seed, and there's a way to clean it and process it that we can talk about again another time. But if you save that seed, you may not end up with the same plant. It may not even be productive. You may have a pretty beautiful plant and no fruit or no tomatoes. But you might get lucky and you might get something. It just, there's no guarantees at if you're going to use that kind of a seed. Now, if you know where the seed came from, let's say you grew tomatoes and you know the packet and you know it's not a hybrid and you planted it, you can collect that seed from your tomatoes and save it and grow it the next year. I do that all the time. You just got to be careful where you get the seeds from.
Because I know you can plant an avocado pit and get a plant. I've never gotten an avocado, but
Right.
my nephew has planted the tops of pineapples and grown pineapples, but he lives in Florida, so that might be part of it too. But we do have enough. Go ahead.
I was gonna say for like peppers, you just have to make sure they're at the right maturity level. Peppers have to go to the I'm almost overripe level before you can use those seeds. So there's just some tricks that you have to use in order to save those seeds and get a plant out of them.
Probably not what you want to tackle the first or second year. Maybe you want to get a little experience before you try to save your own seeds. Great. We do have another video that Mandy did for the Portage Public Library that they are sharing with us this evening. Jason, are you set, ready to go? Looks like it. Here's part 2.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mandy Dixon. I am an MSU Extension Master Gardener, and this is the second video in the Gardening 101 series hosted by the Portage District Library. In this video, we're going to talk about your garden plan essentials. What do plants need, and how do you get your garden laid out so that you'll have the most success this summer? I'm excited to share with you, so let's get started. So garden essentials, the very key ingredients include sunlight, water, and healthy soil and nutrients. If you don't have these 3 things, then your plants are going to suffer. So let's talk about them in detail. So first, in order to plan your garden, you need to find where to put it. So we're going to talk about how to find that place in your yard while meeting the 3 requirements. So where will there be the greatest opportunity for 8 hours plus of sun for vegetables, or less for certain types of flowers? How difficult will it be to get water to the garden? And is the soil suitable for planting? So those are going to hit your 3 key points, which is sunlight, water, and soil nutrients. Sunshine is key for plants because it enables them to convert carbon dioxide and water into food for the plant through photosynthesis. We have a basic outline here of how photosynthesis works. Vegetable plants are less productive as sunlight decreases, and some of your flowers are very sensitive to how much sun they get. Some of them need full sun, and other ones need partial shade. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. So the angle of the sun is very important. So what you're going to have to try to do is watch the space for a few days, preferably for longer. If you can do so, it'd be great to watch a space through a full year to determine how much light does that get. You're going to keep in mind location of buildings and trees, and that the summertime sun is more overhead than early spring. As you can see in this diagram, the winter sun is going to be lower in the angle, so your shadows are going to be different from that tree and that house. In summer, it's a little more overhead, so your shadows are going to change again. Now we're going to define the sunlight levels. Full sun plants need at least 6+ hours of sunlight. Your vegetable plants generally prefer 8+ hours. Now, a partial sun plant can use 3 to 6 hours worth of sun and still be quite happy. In fact, they would prefer to stick in that range. Full shade flowers need less than 3 hours of sun, and sometimes they'll even say they prefer morning sun because it's a little more indirect. So keep that in mind when you go and pick up your plants at the nursery. Now, if you're planting from seed, you can certainly look at the packets or go ahead and do a web search. Now, your second key for gardening is water. Most plants require 1 inch of water per week. Now, you're going to have different types of plants that can do with less or more. So keep an eye on, again, use a web search if you're not sure, or just look at your seed packet. Now, rain alone won't always provide enough. So first, you need to know how much you got through rain. So use a rain gauge. I have one sitting on my porch. Next thing is try to place your garden near water, whether it's a place that the hose can reach, or if it's a place you can hook up a soaker hose. You need to see how close to water your garden space is. If it's too far away to reach with a hose, it's going to be a lot of work to haul buckets of water. You can also look at potentially using rain barrels off the side of your house. Your gutter is a great source to get some rain from different sheds, but you'll need water wherever you are in your garden. You will need some form of water. Garden requires lots of water, most of it in the form of perspiration. There is a lot of work in gardening, but we're talking about ways to make it easier. And if you can keep these key building blocks in mind, you'll have a successful year with minimal work. Now, the third building block is your fertile and well-drained soil. Now, if you're not sure if your soil drains well, you can go and dig a bucket-sized hole. You fill it with water. If the water's still sitting there in 24 hours, you have a problem. Your soil is too dense and won't drain, so you will need to use raised beds. Now, if you kind of have an idea that your soil is pretty well waterlogged, if you have puddles in your yard, those are areas that you're not going to be able to plant normal vegetables and flowers in. There are some different types of swampy type plants that will love to live there. So keep that in mind. But for your vegetable garden, you're going to need to find a different place. Or you can use raised beds and containers. Now, the other key element of your soil is your fertility. This can get technical, but the easiest way to find out is to do a soil test. Now, how do you do a soil test? Well, first, find out what it is. It's a way to obtain the organic and nutrient composition of the soil in an area of your yard. So what you're going to do is you're going to dig little holes throughout your yard or garden. The soil test instructions will tell you how deep. Normally, it's anywhere from around 6 inches deep, and you'll just do a selection of them throughout your yard, and you're going to combine all those samples, and then you're going to put it on a little baggie and mail it off to the sample lab. Now, if you do this through the MSU test option, they will send you a little report that looks like this. It says so this one was specifically for a vegetable garden. That's what they asked for. They were using it for vegetables. You can also do one for your lawn if you want to find out what's going on with your lawn soil and what you need to add to make your lawn healthy and lush. For the vegetable report here, you can see that they outline the different minerals and phosphorus and potassium and magnesium. And they tell you, do you have below optimum, optimum, or above optimum levels? And then the nice thing on the next part of this soil test results, it says exactly how much you need to add to your soil in order to get the best results. And then they give you a breakdown of different fertilizer types that you can use. So like if you have a 22-0-22 for this one, you'll want 16 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So it gives you an idea of what to actually use. Now, keep in mind the first number on your fertilizer bag is your nitrogen, your N. Your phosphorus is your second number, which is your P, and your potassium is your third number, which is K. Now that we've figured out what's our soil like, where we can put the plants in order to still reach water and they get the right amount of sunlight, now we can actually design the garden space that we found. So we're going to talk about placement of plants, spacing, gardening, and some container ideas. First, you're going to plan on your paper. So don't go out and put it in the garden without at least having a plan sketched out on your computer, on a piece of paper, so that you know what you're planning to do. So you can see here, I have a plan, and it's just a piece of paper. And this tells me how I put my seedlings in. I do the same thing for all of my garden beds, and I just lay out what is going to go where. Part of the reason for that is that you can make sure you're putting your tall plants on the north end of the garden. When you're putting in seeds, it's kind of hard to know in your head, okay, this is 6 to 9 inches, this is 6 to 9 inches, this one's 9 to 12. You have to physically go and figure out which ones get taller or shorter so that you can put your tall ones on the north end because they're going to shade out anything to the north of them. So you'll want to make sure they're at the north end. The other thing it helps you do is it helps you keep records, because you need to put your plants in different spots. So if you put your tomatoes in one bed, you're not going to want to cycle those tomatoes into that bed the next year. By rotating your plants to different areas, you reduce the pest and disease buildup that is going to be in that soil for that specific type of plant. Now, if you can keep families away from that area, that would be even better. So for example, your nightshade family, which includes like your potatoes and your tomatoes, shouldn't be put in the same spot. So don't put your potatoes where you put your tomatoes this year. Allow enough space for full-size plants. You need to plan to have space for the full-grown version of your plant. So if you're growing a tomato, for example, that tomato is going to get at least 3 feet wide, but the seedling's only 2 or 3 inches wide. So you need to plan accordingly. It's going to go from 2 to 3 inches to 2 to 3 feet. And you can also consider succession planting. So if you plant those radishes we talked about in the first video, that only takes about 30 days to grow and harvest, you can put in another plant right after that. But keep in mind, just because you have a big space doesn't mean you should fill it full of plants the first year. We'd suggest you start small, match your time and ambition, and get a feel of how much time the garden is going to take for you. So how much time is it going to take you to plant, to weed, to water, and to harvest? And be aware if it's out of sight, out of mind, because if you don't see it on a regular basis, you don't see it daily, you're going to lose track of it and things are going to fall to disrepair and your plants aren't going to do as well because you won't have your care. And your pest problems could become quite big, quite fast if you're not paying attention to it. The other thing is for spacing, make sure you aren't putting plants too close together. If you put 2 plants close together, like you can see with this Swiss chard, neither plant's going to get as big and as healthy as it could, and you're going to have more pressure from diseases because it's not as healthy from nutrient sources because they're competing with each other. Now you can grow some more in less space with a square foot garden. And this is one of the methods that is more of intensive planting. It is a raised bed. You use only the amount of seeds you need in each of these square foot blocks. So as you can see, you've got a raised bed, and they've put lines in how much time the little partitions in it, so you know where the 1 foot spacing is, and it helps you space your planting. So here you can see for each 1 foot square, you can put 1 broccoli, or you can put 4 leaf lettuce, or 9 bush beans, or 16 carrots. And you'd only put 1 seed in each of those little grids in the spacing as suggested, and you'll get a full harvest from that 1 square. Now, a raised bed is just a really big container, but if you do want to do smaller containers on your deck, let's say you have a balcony, you can still do grow in containers. First, you want to make sure your container is big enough to hold your mature plant, whatever the size of that plant may be. You need at least 6 to 8 inches of root growth. So that's how deep your plant must be at minimum. Deeper is probably better, but at least 6 to 8 inches. Now keep in mind your small containers will dry out more quickly than your larger containers, so you will need to water them more often. And because nutrients are consumed quicker in those small containers, you might have to fertilize more. Now color is kind of helpful to know. In the summer, those dark containers will absorb more heat, which means you are going to have to water them more often. Otherwise, you could potentially damage your plants. And light containers reflect the heat, so that does help them stay a little bit cooler in the summer and not dry out quite as fast. Here's some containers to help spur your imagination. They're a combination of various vegetables and flowers in beautiful bright buckets. So this is a really fun way of getting some variety on your deck and still getting something to grow that you can eat. And here's another selection of various plantings. So you've got the radio flyer wagon, and you've got a wheelbarrow, and even just a bag of soil that someone cut up in the top, loosened up a little bit, and put their tomato in there. You've got gutters hanging on a wall for a beautiful shady summer salad. You've got those big totes that you can use, or a kiddie pool, and of course the fun community vehicle. So the old car that they filled up full of plants in the community garden. Now, if this gets your motor going and you want a little bit more, some additional resources are here. We all know the old adage, if it's on the internet, it must be true. Well, we suggest you stick with science-based resources so that you do know the information is true. So here's a few sites that'll get you started. You've got a Gardening in Michigan site, a soil testing site that'll help you walk through that soil testing process if you want to get that started. A smart gardening website that talks about keeping the amount of water or reduce the amount of water that you're going to need in your garden and reduce the amount of chemicals that you're relying on. There's square foot gardening information if you want to learn a little bit more about that method. And then there's the Ask an Expert option, which will give you a way to ask your questions and have someone actually respond to you, an expert in that area. I want to thank you, and I hope you enjoyed, and go garden.
From and our 2 speakers that we have today are Lisa Orgler and Gary Wittenbach, and you're going to get to hear lots of.
Thank you, Mandy. As I said earlier, always learn some tip from you every time we see you. I think knowing where to plant your garden might be as important to do first before you choose what you want to plant. Might that be true?
Yes, you'll want to know that you have a space to put them. But the nice thing is you can plant almost anything in containers and move them anywhere in your yard. So I would say, yes, it's important if you want to do more than a few things, but you can grow almost anywhere.
How about here's a question. When planting vegetables in buckets, how often should they be watered, and how do you know when to water them?
It's going to vary because in a container, it depends on how big the plant is, how big the container is. So there's no real set in stone, water it once a week. In the summer, I sometimes have to water it every single day, sometimes even twice a day if it's like the 95, 100-degree days. So what you're going to do is you're going to just keep an eye on the soil. If you put your finger, the easiest way, just put your finger in it, and if at about ½ inch to an inch it's still dry, you'll definitely want to water it. And you just need to keep checking it. On those really hot days, like I said, I've had to water it twice. If the soil starts pulling away from the sides of your container, it is way too dry and you have to really intensively water that for multiple times. Sometimes in that case, I'll even dunk the whole bucket in another bucket of water, so it soaks up the water and gets rid of that caking, because that means your soil is really dry and it's going to have a hard time soaking up that water. It's just going to run right through. Does that help?
Go ahead.
Now, just make sure that helps, or if you need more information.
If you're going to plant in a container, what kind of additives should you put in your soil to help it stay moist? Is there anything you can do to, like adding vermiculite or something like that, to make it fluffier to hold the water?
Most of the planting, the soil mixes that you can purchase, the garden soil, most of them have those items in them already. That's why they're so light and fluffy, and they have little white pieces in them. They already have that, and some of them even have fertilizer in them, so you don't even have to fertilize for so many months. So just keep an eye on the bag. You wouldn't be buying straight compost because you don't want that for a container. And you won't be buying, the stuff you purchase for a container is going to have those ingredients already in them.
And Dorothy wants to know, how do you ward off deer? I would like to know that too, for other reasons.
I think all of us would, but your biggest thing for deer is you have two choices. Either you can grow stuff that they don't really like, and you'll have probably about a 50-50 success rate, depending on how hungry they are. But the other thing is just making sure you have exclusions. Fences are your best friend, but they have to be tall enough, or they have to be. Deer have poor sense of depth perception, so you can use that to your advantage by making sure your fences look a little awkward. But there's no real good answer that I can give you. I am not a deer expert. I can just tell you your best options are fencing and planting stuff deer don't like.
I have a friend who has an in-ground garden, and he puts his chicken wire fence up, and then it's like, if it's, say, 3 foot tall, he'll buy the 4 or 5 foot tall chicken wire and he bends it over. So when they try to put their heads over, they hit chicken wire.
Yeah, it's a depth perception. They won't jump over something they can't. They get a little concerned about certain types of fencing that they can't see, or they can't tell where it ends.
Does it help to tie colored strings or, strips of cloth or anything to your fence? Are they afraid of that type of thing?
I haven't heard of a deer be afraid of anything.
Sure wasn't afraid of my car the other night. Any other great tips or any other questions, folks? We've got a few minutes here. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. Well, again, I would like to thank you, Mandy, and for sharing your wonderful knowledge of getting our garden started. I would like to let people know who plan to watch us next week. We're going to have a brand new class on indoor air quality. Unfortunately, most of us have been spending way too much time indoors lately, and it would be great to know how to keep our indoor air quality as best as it can be, other than planting all of our garden plants to help clean our air. But so please join us next Tuesday for that class. And then on Thursday, we're going to have something brand new with Jason, our education director, and Chris, our executive director. They're going to be talking with a community member about housing. and housing concerns in the Kalamazoo area. So that will be another great class to come and listen to, a presentation about housing here in town. I will send out reminders to you next week, along with the tip of the week. I hope I can find a good gardening one. One of my favorites is get on the mailing list for the seed catalogs, because they'll make you think it's spring and summer, even when it's snowing outside. Those pictures will make you get excited. Even if you end up going to buy your plants, at least you've got pictures and you know what you might want to try. So again, Mandy, thank you so much. Thank you, Portage Public Library, for letting us show her videos. We certainly appreciate it, and we hope to bring you part 3 of her video series in the near future. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.